Just a quick disclaimer, this is a relatively old script written when the game first came out, so there may be a few minor inconsistencies with what can be done in the footage, and some of the things I may make reference to due to game patches. However, it doesn't affect the core breakdown of the game, and it absolutely doesn't change how I feel about the game as a whole, so please enjoy. After 26 long years of the franchise lying dormant, the time has finally come. Streets of Rage is finally back at last, and I couldn't be happier. With such an important legacy to live up to, Streets of Rage 4 sets out to capture the feeling of old school beat 'em up gameplay, and in short, I'm happy to say that in my opinion it has succeeded. I have previously taken a look back at the original Streets of Rage trilogy, and have broken down the essence of gameplay in order to see just how they hold up, what makes them so important to the beat 'em up genre, and why they are such beloved games as a whole. So please take a look at those videos if you are unfamiliar with the series, as I'll be making some references to those games throughout the course of this video, as Streets of Rage 4 heavily bases itself on Streets of Rage 2 in particular. There will be spoilers relating to the story and gameplay throughout, so if you have yet to experience the game for yourself, I would advise avoiding this video, as there are some great references and callbacks that long-time fans will really appreciate when playing for the first time. With that said, let's jump into Streets of Rage 4 and see if it respects the foundation created by its predecessors and manages to capture the unique Streets of Rage feel, as we ask the question, does Streets of Rage 4 live up to its legacy? So the story continues 10 years after the events of Streets of Rage 3. Mr. X was completely defeated, leaving things peaceful once and for all. However, throughout the course of those 10 years, Mr. X's twin children, the Y-Twins, were growing up, leading to the eventual formation of a new crime syndicate, led by the two of them, no doubt to avenge their father's efforts. The Y-Twins are planning to brainwash the entire city into criminal activity with the power of hypnotic music. Upon learning about the new uprising, former detective Blaze Fielding rounds up her friend and former ally, Axel Stone, the daughter of Adam Hunter, Cherry Hunter, and upon calling for Dr. Zan for help, a cybernetically enhanced apprentice of Zan, known as Floyd Uriah, shows up to fight against the Syndicate, with Adam Hunter himself appearing once again as a playable character as an unlockable, for the first time since his very first appearance in the original Streets of Rage. Streets of Rage 4 features a plentiful amount of different modes to keep you entertained as you play through the game, including an online co-op feature for story mode and a versus mode, which is a first for the series. Story mode, which is unlocked from the get-go, takes you through the campaign, opting for a different take on progression, which I quite liked. Because of this approach, failing a stage will take you back to the beginning of said stage rather than having to restart the game in its entirety, making this entry very accessible. There are a total of 12 stages to work your way through. Each stage starts you off with the predetermined amount of lives depending on the difficulty you choose, and allows you to earn more lives for every 8,000 points earned. Points can be accumulated by playing well. Going for high combos and eating food items at full health are some of the best ways to earn points, and all contribute towards obtaining the elusive S rank. Each stage has its own score ranking, which makes replaying levels a lot of fun, and will keep score chasers entertained for a while. Upon completion of the story mode, you unlock Stage Select, which allows you to revisit all previously completed stages and try for higher scores, and attempt to beat stages on higher difficulties, which I found to be highly addicting. Replaying stages to get better at the game and obtain higher scores and ranks perfectly encapsulates what the original beat 'em ups of the time were all about, and I really appreciate this approach to the game. Moving on to the gameplay, Streets of Rage 4 uses Streets of Rage 2 as the foundation for how the game plays. Unfortunately for some, this may seem like a regression of the series, as characters are stripped of their ability to run and roll, which was featured as a rather fun improvement to Streets of Rage 3. However, this doesn't take away from the core gameplay, and your movement options still allow for careful methodical positioning, which depending on your preferences may be for better or worse. For me, as I much prefer Streets of Rage 2, I really like this approach, which allows for slower, more thought out gameplay. The character roster remains faithful and offers the types of playstyles we've become accustomed to, using the power, technique, speed, jump and stamina stat values. Strangely, you cannot find this information on the character select screen as you could in previous entries, but you have to seek it out in the extras menu. And while not much of an issue, especially for series veterans who typically would know what to expect from a character's playstyle, newcomers to the series might struggle to find exactly what kind of character they would like to play from the get-go. Going into the character select screen for the first time, we see the return of a more grisly looking Axel Stone. His character bio gives us a slight insight into why he looks the way he does, which does a good job of showing the passing of time between the third and fourth entry. He remains a balanced character overall, much like his previous appearances. We also see the return of Blaze Fielding, looking as good as always with a slightly faster play speed but with shorter range and damage. Adam's daughter Cherry Hunter makes her debut appearance with her playstyle being very similar to how we first saw Adam's younger brother Skate. With her ability to run and even perform a few similar looking moves, she's a good choice if you find yourself missing the run feature from Streets of Rage 3. We have a second newcomer in the form of Floyd Araya. He provides a heavy hitter playstyle similar to Streets of Rage 2's Max, offering large damage potential with slower movement, which I found to be my preferred way of playing, as whenever I play Streets of Rage 2, I always like to use Max. Upon completion of Stage 4, you unlock the last of the base roster, Adam Hunter, who is equipped with a fun to use dash, which can be used to get behind enemies and catch them off guard, while also maintaining his high damage similar to his original appearance in Streets of Rage. The game features a rather addictive lifetime score progression system, which gives way to some really appreciated unlockables in the form of retro characters. Over time you accumulate score for every stage you complete, which will unlock extra characters for you to play, starting with the original Streets of Rage cast, all the way up to the Streets of Rage 3 cast, with their original movesets intact from their respective games, which is a really nice touch. Especially if you were missing the run and roll feature, you can simply pick a Streets of Rage 3 character once unlocked, and for the most part everything will feel just as you remember it. The same applies for any of the retro characters. They fit in with the gameplay surprisingly well, which shows just how much attention was paid into making things feel as true to form as possible. Sadly, there are two notable exclusions from the roster of Streets of Rage 3 retro characters. Not all that surprising is the exclusion of Ash, originally only playable in the Japanese release of Streets of Rage 3. At least there's a small nod to his existence within the game. More surprising is the exclusion of Rue the Kangaroo, especially considering there's a cameo appearance of him in the new art style. But all hope is not lost, as with the current gaming landscape, providing the game has sold well enough, then there's always the potential for additional characters in the future. Seeing Rue, Shiva and Max in the new art style leaves me feeling optimistic for potential new playable characters in the future. Streets of Rage 4, while remaining faithful to classic gameplay, also brings some welcome improvements to the series in both graphics and gameplay. The artwork in this game is absolutely beautiful, with high amounts of detail and fluid animation, which I think is a perfect evolution of the classic pixel art style. Familiar enemy types from all three previous games also return, along with some fresh faces and a few new tricks to help mix up your approach. And with the game being built around the Guard Crush engine, you can pull off some great combos with its juggling mechanics. It even allows you to catch a thrown weapon after it hits an enemy, which feels as satisfying as it sounds. More nostalgic love is thrown onto Streets of Rage 2 fans with the inclusion of bonus throwback bosses. These are accessed by using the taser weapon on the arcade machines, another throwback for Streets of Rage 2. This will then take you to a very familiar boss fight from the past, which is really cool to see. The amount of love in this game for the second entry in the series is phenomenal, but it does make me feel pretty bad for fans of the other entries. Character-specific special moves make their return with an interesting risk and reward mechanic. The special meter featured in the third entry is scrapped in favour of taking health from reserve and giving you the chance to earn it back by attacking enemies, which I find to be a rewarding mechanic, allowing you to take risks in tight spots and earn back health with skilled play. You can continuously use your special move as many times as your health bar will allow, with current reserve health being displayed in green. You can fight your way back up to full health, but be warned, if you take a single hit, then you'll lose all of your reserve health, which can be very dangerous in some situations. Some stages even start you off with reserve health due to story related reasons. It's also worth noting that depending on which difficulty you play on, that it will have an effect on the amount of reserve health you use up each time you perform a special move. You have 3 different special moves to utilise as opposed to the previous game's 2 moves. The neutral defensive special is a great option when you find yourself surrounded by enemies and will give you some much needed breathing room. Your side special allows for a more offensive approach, dealing more damage, and new to this entry, the aerial special can be used offensively as well as position your character. This was especially the case when using Blaze, and it was also fun to use. Blitz attacks return in Streets of Rage 4 and are performed in the same way as the previous entries, which work great as combo enders or crowd control options. Axel and Blaze's attacks are retained from their prior appearances, albeit with them feeling slightly underpowered from what the series veterans would be used to. But this isn't a problem due to the game feeling balanced overall. Cherry's Blitz attack is also a lot of fun to use, especially after wall bounces, and much like in Streets of Rage 3, can be performed straight out of a run. Floyd and Adam's Blitz attack is perfect for keeping enemies away from you, and while also great options for combo ending, they excel just as much as a defensive tool. Moving on to one of the most important aspects of the game, the music, and oh yes, they are exactly the kind of upbeat catchy tunes you would expect to hear in this franchise. The core soundtrack is composed by Olivier Derivière, who did an astounding job on the stage compositions, and for the bosses we have a whole host of guest composers bringing their unique sound to the game, including none other than Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima, the legends behind the previous game's soundtrack. Almost all of the tracks featured in the game sound perfect for Streets of Rage and the series' legacy of highly praised music, and although I would still prefer the Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack overall as a whole, this game features some of my favourite songs from the whole series. However, if you somehow find yourself feeling a little nostalgic for some of that older Streets of Rage musical goodness, then the option to switch to the classic music exists, which is a really cool feature for fans. The only real downside is that the tracks chosen are predetermined, and some feel out of place in some areas. The selection of retro tracks cover both the Genesis and Game Gear versions of Streets of Rage, however many noteworthy tracks were completely omitted, including the entirety of the Streets of Rage 3 soundtrack. The game could have benefited much better by having a jukebox feature containing all tracks spanning the entire series and allowing players to choose which song plays in any given stage, but instead, what we are left with feels like a last minute add-on. But if you look at it as the bonus feature that it is, then it succeeds in that, and switching music in between stages is simple and can be done in the pause menu without too much disruption. It's important to remember that Streets of Rage 4 is trying to be a sequel, and as such, some changes were to be expected in order to differentiate itself from its predecessors. But at its core, it looks like Streets of Rage, it sounds like Streets of Rage, and most importantly, it feels like Streets of Rage. So in conclusion, I would say that Streets of Rage 4 most definitely succeeds in living up to the legacy laid down before it, and is a game I can see myself revisiting as often as I do Streets of Rage 2. This game really captures and enhances what makes the series so fun to engage with in the first place, and I commend everyone who helped make this game a reality. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of what makes Streets of Rage 4 what it is, and please feel free to like, subscribe and all that sort of stuff. Who knows what my next topic will be, and even when it will come out. But you know, if you enjoyed this, and you like to look back at the original trilogy, then I'm sure it'll be something worth looking out for. So thank you once again, and take care of yourself guys.